Welcome to the Solemn Yu-Gi-Oh channel where we discuss everything collecting and investing in Yu-Gi-Oh! Today, we have a very exciting one. We have a bunch of all-time highs. And you know, for so long I've been thinking, are we gonna see some retracements? Like, will the market ever cool off? And so far the answer has always been no, 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 no. And once again, a bunch of cards broke record prices. So let's go over those. First of all, this is not a card. This is a booster box. Metal Raiders first edition sealed. Sold for $7,322. We'll see if this gets paid for. I assume it will be. So I will keep you updated if anything weird goes on. But so far, it seems that a Metal Raiders booster box is now $7.3K. Now note, I may be incredibly biased because, you know, I own one of these now. Regardless, you know, it's not really surprising to me. It's also why I bought one. The fact that the second booster box ever made was, you know, relatively low compared to other things out there was weird. It's also filled to the brim with like super high-end interesting cards. You have your Time Wizard, your Gate Guardian, your Thousand Dragon, your Black Skull Dragon, Summon Skull, Change of Heart, Mirror Force. Like, this thing is filled to the brim with hits. It's very hard to pull bad. Like, there's a few like 7 Tools of the Bandit that some people wouldn't really appreciate pulling. There's a few weaker hits, but you don't have as many truly awful hits as in some booster boxes. So overall, I mean, the growth makes sense, but again, maybe I'm biased because I own one. Next up, we had a really big one, a TP2 morphing jar for $15,000. Now, I personally know who bought this, so I will not go into details as to who they are and so forth, but I know who bought this. It's probably being paid for because they showed me. Overall, I haven't really spoken about tournament packs much on this channel because it's a very weird one to me. Like, I respect the major impact they had on the game as a whole. You know, players from back then, they're like, whoa, getting those was insane. Morphing Jar was broken, Mechanical Chaser was broken, like it changed the game. It was very hard to get. Even back then, Mechanical Chaser was what, 100 or 200 bucks, purely because of how much better it was than Lajin, I want to say. Just a major game-changing thing. Was already not, you know, very distributed because obviously if a game is brand new, you don't have many local stores supporting it yet. And so, you know, I respect all of that. You also have a lot of issues with the fact that a lot of these are OC as hell. So getting like a PSA 10 or 9 is actually a pretty like huge feat of strength. So I get all of that. And that's also why they are justifiably some of the most expensive cards in the hobby. My only fear with them is that, except for Morphing Jar, if you saw the anime with Bakura and so forth, you know, Mechanical Chaser isn't really much of an anime fan favorite. It isn't much of a casual fan favorite. So, you know, that makes me a little bit more hesitant. But regardless, you know, you can't argue with the sheer volume of people loving these cards and loving the tournament aspect from back in the day. So I get it, I love it. I personally don't, you know, go for it because it's just not something I'm willing to spend so much on, but I absolutely get people trying to get some full sets of this, and good luck to them because it's incredibly hard. Then we had a Dark Magician Girl, the World Championship 2017 Ghost Rare promo in Japanese, for $11,000. This was a PSA 9. You really just can't argue with Dark Magician Girl. And when it's such limited supply as this one, it's Ghost Rare, like it's got everything going for it. It's the MFC art. Like, again, you can't argue with the sheer nostalgia, iconic value of a Dark Magician Girl together with waifu tax. Like, I don't know. If you had to ask me the one card that could potentially beat all others, except for like Blue Eyes or something, it would be Dark Magician Girl. I truly believe that that card could be one of the holy grails once the stigma around waifus vanishes, because it is what it is. It's truly iconic and people pay the waifu tax, and you only really have one big winner in Dark Magician Girl, and that's the MFC one. You have way more ways to fight over Blue Eyes. Like, you can have LOB, SDK, DDS. There's a lot more alternatives that are viable. Whereas for Dark Magician Girl, it's MFC. You want to buy the best Dark Magician Girl? MFC. Is there something else? No. There are other cool prints, especially like this one. But from a set collector perspective, it's MFC, you know. I actually think that card, like, is gonna win majorly. 11K for a World Championship Dark Magician Girl. Next up, we had a Mechanical Chaser. Once again, tournament pack, PSA 10, sell 4, another 15K. We already spoke about TP earlier. It's not a surprise. Majorly huge deal, these cards. And some of the biggest Yu-Gi-Oh collectors, like when it comes to old school, are very, very infatuated by TP. So these prices, you know, are very unlikely to not hold. Next up, we had a Stein. This was a little while ago. I already spoke about the 8.5 and the 9.5. Selling for, you know, the 8.5 sold for an all-time high at that grade, but then the 9.5 sold like slightly lower than people expected. We spoke about this, how PSA 10 is just better than BGS 9.5 in many people's eyes. However, here we had a cool auction. A PSA 6 sold for $9,200. That is wild. I mean, I'm not judging. It's a Stein Shonen Jump price card. This is probably the card I've fapped over the most on this channel, so I'm sure you're tired by now. I don't know, 9.2 is high for sure for a 6, but I won't be arguing with Stein. Next up, we had a Majestic Star Dragon, Ghost Rare First Edition PSA 10 for $6,000. That was a best offer accepted. I don't know if this is an all-time high, but I think it is, because last I saw from these ghosts was like 4 and 5K, so I assume this is an all-time high. Even if it's not, it's obviously insanely high. Once again, ghost rares from 5Ds are interesting. They are ultra rare, insanely hard to grade well. The only issue is that it's really a handful of them that are propping up like all the value. And from a macro level, if you are buying into 5Ds, all the value is there. Like, you have your ghosts, you have maybe ultis, and then everything else is just not even a thing, not even to be discussed. So, you know, you gotta know what to target when going for that era, but you can't argue with these prices. Next up, we had a PSA 8 Shrink for $8,000. That's pretty low. And maybe people will call me insane for this, but I think that's pretty low. Because it's not one of the most printed Shonen Jump price cards. It's definitely not as iconic as Crush Card or Cyberstein at all. Not as iconic as Gold Sark either. But a PSA 8 for 8K, I don't know, I think that's just pretty low. But again, people will call me crazy. Once again, I will never argue with Shonen Jump price cards. It is what it is, especially if someone is trying to get the full set together. They will pay anything basically for whatever grade. 8K for a PSA 8, you know, is mind-blowing. I just think it's pretty cheap regardless, but maybe I'll be wrong in the long term, who knows. Next up, we had a Dark End PSA 9 for 5.5K. So this one's interesting to me. I did kind of see this one coming. The simple reason is that this is like the most accessible Shonen Jump price card. It's not even iconic. There's currently a lot of them listed. You know, if someone wants to get the whole set together, they'll still need one. So it's not like this is worthless or anything. Clearly, it's still a very expensive card. But I think of all the Shonen Jump price cards, long term, this will be the loser. Regardless, you know, even if you're among winners, being the worst of the best, you know, isn't all that bad. Next, we had DDS Blue Eyes PSA 9 sell for $6,900. Then we had another DDS Blue Eyes sell for $6,200, also PSA 9. A couple days from each other, so, you know, I won't be judging like, oh, the market is changing or something, you know. A 10% price difference over a couple days on the same card is perfectly acceptable, especially with bidding. All it takes is one person being asleep for, you know, a 10% difference. So that's not a huge deal. 6.9, 6.2 for DDS. Next up, we had a TP2 Morphing Jar, once again, PSA 8 sold for 3K. So given that the PSA 10 sold for 15K a few days before that, that is really not that surprising. Oh, I don't want to say a few days. It was actually 1 day difference. I'm pretty sure the buyer of the 8 saw the 10 go and was like, you know what? I'll buy the 8 for 3K because the 10 just sold for 15. 3K for an 8. Wow. I don't know what the problem was with the card. It doesn't seem to be too off-center, but again, I didn't have a high-quality scan, so might be some service issue, I don't know. Again, I won't argue with TP. Those sets just have so many all-time favorite fans. All it's missing really is like the casual anime fan that a Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters Ultra or a GX Ulti would have. Next up, we had a Necroface PSA 9 First edition sell for 3.9K. That's quite high. I personally don't have a problem with it. I have one BGS 9 and I have another one being graded right now that might be a 9 or a 10. Or, you know, unless I get unlucky, maybe it'll be an 8. So, you know, I benefit from this greatly, but I do think 4K for a 9 is quite high. Like, that's quite high. I want to make sure that this doesn't get relisted. I didn't see any relisting so far, so I'd like to believe it was paid for. But that is quite high. Do note, however, that Gladiator's Assault pulling one specific secret is borderline impossible. I don't know how many Necrofaces per case you could expect. I think it was maybe 1 or 2. It's shit pull rate because there were so many secrets in here. The pool got completely diluted, and so Necroface, like back then, was already a $500 card purely because you played it in your deck, and then it was also like way too hard to pull. So, you know, it's not like I am super mind blown. It's just for a 9, 4K. I don't know. I feel like the last few months you could still get Necrofaces for like $500 that would be PSA 8s or 9s. Again though, it's in my best interest that this card goes way up, but I don't know, it's a bit of a weird one. Finally, we had a wavy, faded PSA 10 first edition Raigeki Lob sell for 3K. Now that is something. That's quite high. I'm not against this, but it's a super though. 3K for a super. I guess Flame Swordsman also is a super, but I'd like to think that Flame Swordsman is more loved than Raigeki. Then again, Raigeki is part of the Power 5. I don't know, it's a tough one. Overall 3K, it's in line with the 9 that sold for 1K, so I'm not like mind blown or anything. It is LOB, it is a super. LOB is rising crazy fast, so it makes sense that the cards inside are also just way harder to pull and find because of how high the prices are. So I'm not against this, it's just really weird to see it black on white. So that was all. We once again had a bunch of all-time highs the past few weeks, which is wild. Again, like I've been expecting some type of retrace and it just isn't coming. Maybe it will, maybe, but so far it hasn't. Pokemon has retraced wildly. Of course, now you had the Logan Paul thing, so it's catching back up. But Yu-Gi-Oh just hasn't seen any retracements whatsoever yet. Wild stuff. Hope you found it interesting. Like, subscribe, and I will see you soon. Ciao.